I think it's become a rite of passage for every generation to go through a kind of event that tests their resolve in what this country is actually all about. For my generation, it was the 2008 financial crisis. I'm a millennial. I just turned 40. I graduated college in 2007, got my first job at a financial firm in New York on the eve of the '08 financial crisis. Think about that. The impact that had on so many of my peers, many of whom weren't able to pay off college debt. They were cynical about capitalism, and they stayed that way. And they were jaded, and they were really hostile to the core part of what made America great was our system of free enterprise and capitalism. And that cast a long shadow. The 2008 financial crisis, even after it was resolved in financial markets, had a psychological impact on a generation that lasted a much longer time. That's the way I feel about the tragedy of this week, the assassination of my friend Charlie Kirk, which is going to have a long hangover that lives long past the immediate trauma that we all suffered this week. And part of that's the impact that has on the psychology now of Gen Z. Think about it if you're a young person on a college campus. You went through peak wokeness in 2020, 2021, the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of the mandates and closures, the aftermath of George Floyd. You were told to keep your thoughts to yourself if you have one particular political perspective. If you wore the wrong hat to a class or to a job interview, you wouldn't get the job or you wouldn't get the right grade. That was what they grew up in, and then they were able to begin to find their way out of it. Young people turned their attitudes in the 2024 presidential election. I visited many of those campuses, beginning to see young conservatives or even young independent thinkers who might have had certain conservative views beginning to once again feel free to express themselves in the open, spawning that debate that's supposed to characterize what our universities are at their core, what they're all about. And right when that culture of free speech and open debate and the freedom to express yourself, even if you're right of center, right when that was beginning to blossom, what happened? The key figure in America who on college campuses was pushing for that was shot on a college campus while he was exercising that culture and that right of free speech in our country. Think about the generational psychological trauma. It's like what my generation had in the 2008 financial crisis on steroids. This time not with respect to capitalism, but with respect to free speech itself. That's what I'm worried about. But it doesn't have to stay that way. And my message to Gen Z is, don't lose your faith in what makes this country great. Don't lose your faith in free speech. Was that a tragedy? Was that a travesty of the human spirit? Was that assassination subhuman? Absolutely was. It's unacceptable. It's not who we are. But we can't succumb to this culture of fear either. That's not the way forward. And if you think about it, even in a very first personal sense, look at the way I'm talking to you right now. It's through digital channels. Unlike 4 years ago, a lot of the platforms, even big technology companies, because of the environment that's changed, because of the legal environment that's changed, are now actually more censorship-free than they've been in a very long time. You have an opportunity to reach people with your opinion without having to have that fear. And you know what? Nothing in life comes without any risk, but the truth of the matter is you should not allow this incident to cow you back into submission, because that allows the other side to win. Speak your mind in the open. Speak it with conviction. Speak it with respect. That too is part of who we are. And just because you're free to speak doesn't mean that what you say is necessarily right. The right to free speech does not automatically make every word you utter right to say. But I would challenge you to speak your mind open and just use one gut check. I wouldn't even call it a self-censoring filter. I would just call it a gut check. And I don't care if you're on the left or the right, or none of the above. When you have a thought to express, when you're resorting to new media, new channels like the ones we're talking through right now, just ask yourself before you put it out there on Twitter, on X, on YouTube, whatever it is what I'm saying likely to be good or helpful to America? Or is what I'm about to say hurtful to America? And I think of a lot of people, even our friends on the left, a lot of whom have said some things that didn't make me proud over the last few days to see as a fellow American. If you just pause to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say right now, celebrating the death of a fellow citizen, reveling in the death of somebody I disagree with, is that good for America or isn't it? And if every one of us just used that filter before we uttered the first thought that crossed our mind, the palm of our hands in our social media app, man, this country would be on the path to a cultural renaissance that we deserve, a revival, a reblossoming of that culture of free speech without fear. But it's not just about your right to speak, but also developing the virtue of what's actually right to say. I'm reminded of what makes our country great in the aftermath of even this week, 9/11. I went to the 9/11 memorial and I met so many young men and women, but there were a lot of young men who came up in particular to take pictures when we were at the memorial, who were in their early 20s, who were in their mid-20s, who were basically kids, some of them infants, at the time they lost their mom or their dad, or both, in the Twin Towers. One of them, I met a family of two brothers, had lost their father. They were 1 and 3 years old at the time. Those two planes hit the Twin Towers, the same age, by the way, as Charlie Kirk's kids today. And I met their mom, too, who raised them to be two young men who are doing extraordinary things right now, very decent, very thoughtful, very ambitious young men that I'm sure would have made their father proud. And that's a reminder that for everything there is that's dark and twisted and evil in our world, and there is a lot of that, there is still so much more that is good, that is beautiful, that is right, that is virtuous. That's what we fight to protect. That's what our founding fathers fought for 250 years ago. And especially for the young people, I get it. I understand the psychological trauma that right when you turned the corner and felt like you were able to express yourself on a campus, you see one of the guys who inspired you to do that get shot to his death. Let that still not stifle your spirit in this country, difficult as that is. That's what our founders fought for. That's what Charlie Kirk fought for. That's what this country is all about. It's what makes America the greatest nation known in the history of mankind. And it falls on your shoulders, our shoulders, to still stand up with confidence, with conviction, at a moment in our history where we have more tools, including the one we're talking through right now, at our disposal, to actually express ourselves freely and with respect. Let's do that and honor this country's legacy and pay it forward for the next generation to still enjoy.